Hi there, I'm Fraser here at Simpson Physiotherapy, and today we're going to speak about what is post-stroke fatigue and ways that you can manage your fatigue after a stroke and different options that you have depending on the different type of fatigue that you have. Okay, so I'm Fraser. I'm a stroke rehab specialist physiotherapist. I work at Simpson Physiotherapy, and I'm here to give you as much advice as I possibly can to help you be more successful in your life after a stroke and make your recovery as meaningful and as much of it as possible. So, post-stroke fatigue, there's actually a few different types of post-stroke fatigue, and they all kind of get clumped together as one. The first one that you've probably heard of already is neural fatigue, brain fatigue. Okay, after the injury of having a stroke, certainly within the first 6 months, we see that biggest amount of recovery from people in the first 6 months as the brain clears out the damaged tissue and the inflammation in our brain settles back down again. And that means that things are lighting up and switching back on, and the connections that were maybe stopped working because of the inflammation rather than the injury are starting to switch back on again. Okay, that's your really acute recovery phase. In that phase of you having a stroke, your brain is taking quite an insult to it. Okay, so it's normal to have fatigue at this point, particularly brain fatigue. Your brain is recovering from an injury. Okay, so what it's doing is shutting itself down to a large extent to allow the body's natural healing process to be able to clear out the injured tissue, the dead tissue, so that the healing process can continue. That's normal. Okay, so that's one type of neural fatigue, and we see that very often. So you might find is that if your family member is in hospital immediately after a stroke for the first few days to few weeks, you might find that they're incredibly tired and they're not getting an awful lot of recovery out of their affected side at that point. And that could simply be because the brain is just needing to take a break from thinking, which is very energy intensive, to using that energy to heal the brain itself. Okay, it's why sometimes people are very quiet, look very debilitated after a stroke. Then within a few weeks after that, you find that things are starting to switch back on really quite nicely. Next part of neural fatigue. Your brain has suffered an injury. So when we're looking at people maybe a wee bit further down the line now, so the brain's had a good chance to clear out the injured tissue and then start to be able to lay down new pathways. So you've had a piece of your brain that has been injured. So what the rest of the brain is trying to do is take over from that part of the brain that's been injured. And what that means is that the rest of the brain is actually working much, much harder than it was before. And brain cells, your neurons, they're very much the same as muscle, in the same way that if you work a muscle really, really hard, whether that's running, whether that's lifting heavy weights, doesn't really matter. The muscle fatigues and then needs rest. So if you imagine your brain is needing more rest more frequently, because to be able to continue to do the things that you want, like concentrate talking to people, watching TV, which again is very concentration dependent, walking, moving, learning new ways of doing things, because you have to learn lots of new things and new ways of doing things after you've had a stroke. So your brain is being worked really, really hard at this point to be able to lay down new bits of road cabling to allow the signals in your brain to make the recovery that it needs to get you doing, get you moving, get those arms and legs working, get your speech better, improve your swallow, that sort of thing. So part of that is your brain is just working incredibly hard in the recovery phase and in the learning, the motor relearning, the brain relearning phase, so that you can make the recovery that you need. And rest and downtime is incredibly important. And the way that the brain does that is it tells you to relax, it tells you to sleep, and it makes you feel fatigued so that you actually rest. Okay. The next one that we see quite frequently is muscle fatigue. Okay, so if you think about your muscles as a bag of spaghetti. Now, before the stroke, what would be happening was that your brain would have access to every single strand of spaghetti in that bag. Okay, those strands of spaghetti are called your muscle fibers. The brain tells the muscle to contract and relax, and the muscle works well. after a stroke, you're maybe only able to access, say, 40, 50, 60% of those actual muscle fibers. So half of that bag of spaghetti is no longer able to work. So what happens is that the rest of those muscle fibers, the other 50% of the muscle fibers, have to work twice as hard to be able to overcome, to deal with the fact that the whole muscle isn't working, and you're still able to see, move your arm in a certain way, lift your leg, etc. Now, the great thing about that kind of work is that's where you get a lot of help from doing the right kind of exercises, the right kind of training, because you can retrain muscle, you can bulk it up, lifting weights, lots of kind of more, if you're able and it's safe, you can do more high intensity training, which is to do with how you get your heart rate working, and do interval training with that as well. So there's different ways that we can manage that. The other thing about interval training, strength training, this sort of thing, is it actually helps our brain with our brain fatigue too, because we're improving our circulation, we're getting our heart rate up a bit, so that's bringing up oxygen, nutrients, everything that our brain needs to be able to function at its optimum. Okay, another really nice way. So anyway, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. So that, in a nutshell, is the kind of different fatigues that we get from after a stroke. So we have the neural fatigue. We've got a couple of different reasons why we get that fatigue. And then we get the muscle and joint muscle fatigue as well, that very physical fatigue. Depending on how you've been after your stroke, you can have varying degrees of each of them. Okay, how you combat and how you work with each of them depends on what it is that you're doing, the severity of your stroke, the symptoms that you're displaying after your stroke. Okay, I'm going to give you a few great tips that we use and we try and help our clients manage, so that they can manage the fatigue, so that you can get the best out of your life after your stroke. So the first one I'm going to speak about is pacing and spacing. What does that mean? So before you had the stroke, you were probably able to just get up, get on with it. Okay, you didn't have to think too much about what you were doing that day, whether or not you needed a rest at certain times. Okay, so what pacing and spacing is making sure that you're picking the activities that are really important to you. So 1 can be your rehab, 2 can be socialising with your friends, 3 can be preparing the dinner, 4 can be catching up with your family, these kind of things. Any activity that you want to do, figuring out a way how to do it, and then being more planned and organised round and about it, knowing that you can't do too much before and you need the recovery time afterwards, so that you get the most out of your time doing that activity. So that's what spacing, so that you're not putting too many activities and cramming them all together, saying, I'm going to go to my granddaughter's birthday party, then we're going to go and do the shopping, and then we've got to go and get the tyre fixed on the car. Putting all of them together is an awful lot of things to be doing, and it's not surprising you're crashing and burning after that. Whereas if you say Monday, right, it's my granddaughter's birthday party on the Monday morning, right, I need to make sure I'm giving myself plenty of time to get there, so that I can then really enjoy being there. I might need to go and take a wee lie down, or take a break from all the commotion and everything that's going on whilst you're at the party, so that you can come back into it afterwards and be a bit more refreshed and a lot happier with it. And then knowing that when the party finishes, you're looking for some downtime at that point to give your brain the chance to rest and recuperate, so that you can then go on with task number 2, which could well be meeting friends for coffee in the afternoon, or you could say, actually, the party's more than enough for one day, I'll meet my friends on Tuesday. Okay, so you've got to pick your big rocks and then start planning round and about them. So that's spacing your activities. Pacing means not going hell for leather. Pacing them, what we find an awful lot with people after a stroke is that you do booming and busting, which means that you do lots and lots of activity, then you're shattered, then you do lots and lots of activity, and then you're shattered, then you do lots and lots of activity, then you're shattered. So making sure that what you're not doing is loads all at the same time, because you're feeling good. So because I feel good, I'm feeling better. I've got this, and this that I really want to get done. So I'm going to rush around and get all of that done. It's not the right way to think about it if fatigue management is something that you're needing to pay attention to. Okay, so again, going back to the spacing thing, picking what's important and then being planned and organizing your day accordingly to what your energy peaks and troughs are. Listening to your brain and your body when it's saying, I need to rest. If I keep going, I know tomorrow I'm going to really struggle. So I need to prioritize myself and prioritize my rest times. Okay. Muscle fatigue. Speaking about muscle fatigue. Okay, so a great way to help with muscle fatigue is to actually do the work as well. So we see people who after a stroke are very deconditioned, because what happens is you've lost your mobility to a certain extent, and you're not doing as much activity as you were before the stroke. So what that means is that your muscles, frustratingly, are very much a use it or lose it type thing. So when we're working with our clients, what we find is we have to do a lot of the strength training with you so that we can bulk up the muscles that are still working really well after the stroke, so that they're much better able to deal with the demands that you're putting on them and become more fatigue resistant. Okay. The next thing that you can do from a fatigue side of things, a mental fatigue, a neuro fatigue side of things, is start considering what we call mindfulness meditation based exercises. Okay. Your brain is very much like a car in your garage. When you turn that engine on when the car's in the garage and put your foot down, what happens is the exhaust fumes build up in your garage. Okay, those exhaust fumes themselves, the only way you can, there's two ways you can get rid of them. One is sleep, the other one's meditation. Okay, so as those exhaust fumes build up, that's normal. Okay, that isn't an unusual thing to have happen. And when your brain's on overdrive after you've had a stroke, because it's working a lot harder to deal with the fact that you've had the injury, those exhaust fumes tend to build up faster and the cells themselves tend to fatigue quicker. So we find quite frequently that our clients who have much more mental fatigue, neuro fatigue, get a lot more out of meditation-based practices to help you actually, your brain actually recover faster so that you can then go on about your day. So building in rest periods into your day, and meditation, now this is where the word meditation can turn an awful lot of people off. Realistically, all that I'm doing is when I'm speaking about meditation is say, sit down, close your eyes, switch the phone off, turn the TV off, nice and relaxed position in the chair, and focus on one thing that you can control, which is your breathing. Gently breathing in, gently breathing out. And that's it. That's all meditation is. Okay, the more you practice that, the better it gets and the easier it becomes for you and the more out of it you get. Meditation could take from as little as 5 minutes. It does not need to be long, but your brain will benefit from that downtime to help clear out some of those exhaust fumes so that it's not clogging up your thinking and slowing down your thinking, and your brain will thank you for that afterwards. Okay, some people, when you manage to get into the swing of it, you'll maybe look at doing 15, 20 minutes a couple of times a day, 3 times a day, depending on what works for you. The next thing that's been really interesting that's coming out in the literature recently in the research is looking at what we call high intensity interval training. Now, many people, when they think about high intensity, think about Mr. Motivator with the spandex and the headband and things. Now, high intensity doesn't mean that. High intensity is more to do with what we're doing with your heart and your muscles rather than working up a heck of a big sweat. Okay, so what's really interesting in the literature and in the research, and this is playing out time and time again, irrespective of what almost irrespective of what neurological condition you have, is if we can get you working hard for short bursts where your heart rate's getting up to about 80% of what it should, of its maximum, and then doing that for 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and doing that regularly, as in a couple of times a week, then what we're seeing is some really, really nice improvements in people's walking ability, improvements in their concentration, and just improvements in their overall function. Okay, so if you're interested in something like that, I'm sure there will be certain places that you can do it. You can do it on your own, or you can do it with specialists like us as well, where we do the program with you, make sure it's the right kind of program for you so that you're getting the most out of your recovery. I think I've covered quite a lot there. If you have any questions, please get in touch with us. The phone number is in the show notes. If you think that you can benefit from some of the help that we're able to provide, we have home visits and clinic appointments in and around Glasgow, East Dunbartonshire, all the way up to Stirling, into East Renfrewshire, into Lanarkshire as well. Okay, we have got plenty of specialists who are fabulous at the work they do, and if you'd like to find out more, the number is 0141 530 2092, or you can get us at www.simpsonphysio.co.uk. Take care.